Hello, everybody. This is Jeremiah, and we're back with another C Sharp training. We're back where we were before. I am sorry for the a bit lower quality of this video, but I'm only with my laptop because all the other stuff uh, had to be packed up, and I have a small desk where I can work, and everything is covered with tools. I'm just having my apartment makeover here, so please bear with me. I've tested this and it looks decently on YouTube, so I think I can go on with this. So we are into objects, and we want to continue learning about how to create objects and then how to make them interact with each other and so on. So in the previous video we've created the customer class, so our blueprint for our customer. Then we created some properties for our customer, so the customer ID, company name, yearly revenue, and then we created four different constructors. One which is default, that just creates the object and doesn't do much else, right? And then three others that will be assigning some particular variables within our customer object. And yeah, we have a tendency of saying within our customer class, yeah, and we kind of mix these. So I just want you to remember that the class is just a blueprint, a recipe of how to create an object. It's actually a definition of a type, and the object itself is the physical representation. So it is the object itself with all its properties and stuff and all the information inside and functionalities that will be able to work. Okay, so we have this object, and I told you that we'll be talking about what we can do with our objects this time, right? So the first thing you should know is what can we put in our object. So first, I'll just extend this with some comments, and also I'll put that on the website, which hopefully will be in the comments below the video. So we can put properties, so stuff we can put in our object definition, the class. So we can put yeah, so we can put properties, say variables, right? So all these stuff, right? These will be properties. So if you want to create a object that is a car, it might have a property that is like its color, right? And the car can be blue. Blue is a property of a car. Blue might be a property of a pen as well, right? So it's a color, right? So it might have some particular information, right? Which are properties. Now, the second thing it might have is methods. Now, this is the do part, and I like to have this of the object. I called this the do part because, well, I like to look at the objects that, okay, we can have an object, and like I'm looking at my mouse here, and it's gray, has two buttons, and it has a spinning, like this scroll wheel, right? Underneath it has batteries and a button, and it's a laser mouse, so it has laser sensor and stuff. So those are all the things that might have, right? So the properties, I would say. maybe. Yeah, and the functionality is like, okay, the mouse can send signal. Yeah, okay, you can say the user can click a button. Yeah, it depends on how you describe your object, but yeah, okay, you can say the mouse clicks a button, right? Or the mouse scrolls something, right? Yeah, but these are like the do parts. And I like to call this methods, the do parts, right? And these are all that used to people used to call functions, right? So everything that is the functional thing of our class. Now there is a special part of functions, and that is the constructor, right? The special method. And please, I'm not sure how to spell special, so if it's wrong, then I'm sorry. It's the special method that creates our object. Right? Okay, cool. So, and this is actually what I'm going to talk about today. So methods and constructors. Now, what else can we have? We can have events, right? And this is something that we can also talk about soon, right? And there is a couple of other stuff that we can have in our class, and there is actually a very nice definition of what you can have in the class. And yeah, I just have one monitor now, so bear with me. So let's just go a bit. Yeah, it's MSDN again, because MSDN is very good. And somewhere here they actually told us what can we have in our class, so in our object definition. Blah 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 blah. Behavior, fields, properties, methods, events. Yeah. So okay, fields, properties, methods, and events. Okay. So we said properties, right? We said methods, and we said events. We don't really know what are fields. Yeah, because fields and properties mixed up. So we could say like fields slash properties, okay? It's just for now. And then we'll see what's the difference. But this is actually the same, kind of. Please bear with me, okay? But if you look at the documentation and if you really want to be a strict programmer that holds to what is actually in the programming language, and you want to know all the names that need to be used, then you go with the documentation. So I'll just say fields slash methods, because for our purpose these two are for now the same, okay? And we're going to talk about, well, actually we already said everything about well, say variables, right? So fields and properties. Now we're going to talk about methods now, right? And then we have something called events. We will jump into that soon. I'm not sure if that will be the next video. So coming soon. Cool. Okay, so methods. Okay, what is a method? First of all, let's have some historical information. So, and I folded this because I can. And there is this plus sign on the left that you can fold, and I'm not doing it consciously, really. Just doing this because I'm doing this, because it feels way better to have less code when I'm talking about stuff. So a method is a procedure or a function. Now, how is a method built? Because okay, we already said that this is the do part, so it's going to do something, and it will consist of some code that we are going to write, right? So how do we write a method? Well, first of all, the method needs a return variable. So the difference, if you are familiar more or less with the old days, like Pascal and well, some programming languages that were not really object oriented, and other programming languages where you have functions and procedures, and you knew that a procedure is just a bit of code that does something, and that's it. So it's just a procedure, it does something, right? And a function needs to return something, right? Here, a method is a combination of both. So you actually have a function and a procedure in one, right? So your method can return a value, but doesn't really have to. But still, every time you write a method, you have to define a return type. So people usually say like, okay, void, which means I want to write something that does not return a value. So method not returning any value, right? The simplest of all, right? So whenever I say void, right, this means this construct, this code, will not return any value. Otherwise, if I'm not saying void, I need to define a type of value that will be returned, right? So it might be a integer, it might be a float, it might be a string, or it might be a more complex object of type that is defined by a class that we have designed, or somebody else designed, and we want to return it, right? So let's just say int. So we want to return an int, right? Get a customer ID. Let's just create something like this, right? Why not? And as soon as we write it, you see we wrote this, and there's nothing wrong with this. It's just an empty method, right? But here, as soon as we finished the last bracket, it already got red because, and this is the most usual error you get with a method that returns a value, is that not all code paths return a value. What does mean is that, okay, you have to return a value through all code paths. Now, what is a code path? Now, you should already know conditional statements. You should already know loops, right? So each time you evaluate a conditional statement, a loop, and then your code, now it follows a certain path, right? Because the result of some conditional statement was something, then result of a loop was another something, and then within that loop there might have been some conditional statement, and so on and so on and so on. So each piece of code has a certain path, and each path needs to return a value because your method is supposed to return a value of type int, to be exact. Okay, so how do we return a value within a method? Well, we just say return, right? Okay, if we just say return, well, this is not really great because, well, you can't actually convert a object into a int type. So we need to actually return an int. So whenever we write such a function and you really want to make it not disturb you while doing so, temporarily, and really this should be really temporarily, you can put that. So you can just say, okay, my function returns 0 or returns 1, right? Or you can say -1, whatever suits you. I like 0, right? Okay, and then the compiler will accept this method because now all code paths, and there is a single path, because when you start here, and the only place you can go is this return 0, so that's one path. So this is not really too much complex. There's only one path, and well, it returns 0. Yeah. Okay. What else can you do within a method? Well, you can do any code. We could put the whole Simon game here, and we'll have fun with it. So yeah, that's really not a problem. We could do that. But okay, we want to get a customer ID. So let me just put this. Remember, we had this random, right? So let's just declare this R&D, right? R&D and random, right? We create. Oh, I forgot to say new. Yeah, new. Yep. And then we'll just say return, right? And now R&D and next. It returns an int, right? This R&D next, and I don't care about the value at the moment, so I'll just go like this, and that's cool. Very nice. Okay, now we can use this so that we can like make. Let's just have a few more overloads. So let's just have this one to have this. And yeah, I didn't explain the overloads yet, but bear with me, I will. Now here we'll use something else. Let's just comment this, and we'll create another overload for this, right? And then we'll remove the first one. So let's just think about this like, okay, we don't want the user or whoever is using our object to be able to assign this customer ID. We want to have a particular logic in assigning this ID. We want to do it ourselves, right? That's why I removed this ability from the constructor, right? Now, nobody will be able to actually do that for unless they actually have access to our code and then be able to change that, because this will be a bit more convenient for them. But in some cases, you just want to have this not being able to do so, so that you can restrain yourself or whatever, right? So let's just comment this for a second. So we have two additional constructors. So like just with the company name, and then just with the company name and then the revenue, right? So two more, and maybe let's just put them below because it will be a bit more nice looking, right? So these are the ones that we have previously, and these are the new ones. Now I've commented this here because well, I want to keep this, right, so that you can see what's the difference, and then I'll write the same thing. So this, then customer ID, right, is equal, and what I want to use is this randomizer. So this random function to actually generate any number, whatever, something for me, right? And to use this method, right, we actually do the same thing as we did with this customer ID. So we just say like this, right? And then you can see, okay, there is this get a customer ID. So we can use this, and we put this these two brackets because this method doesn't take any parameters. And yeah, we're getting into some parameters in a second. Yeah, and this works for us. And we can copy that into the second one, right? So that we can use the new tools, right? So let's just scroll up. So first we'll just get rid of this 12 so that we use, see, now we have 6 overloads. First one is just an empty one. Second one is just having the customer ID assigned, then just the company name assigned, then the ID and the company name, then the company name and the revenue, then the customer ID, the company name, and the revenue, and that's it, right? So we have more or less all the possibilities. I don't think, yeah, we don't have the only the revenue, right? Yeah, so yeah, but you can do everything, right? So let's just get rid of that revenue just for a sec. So we're not assigning the revenue, and we're not really defining the ID. Still, if we run the program, we get a number. It's a number, right? I mean, next time we run it, we get a different one. This one starts with a 1, right? So that's why I said when we try to do the guess my number game, we use this like the upper bound to actually make those numbers a bit smaller, because this actually creates really big numbers, right? So, and yeah, they're quite unique. They're not too bad. I mean, they're okay. Um, for simple purposes, they're really okay. Yeah, so you get all that, and then we have this Polsat TV because that's what we did, assign it, right? And the revenue is as we made it here by default, right? So yeah, that's what you can do, and we're actually using a method now. So we're using this method. It's a small piece of code that just returns some value, but you can use a method. Okay, now what if, because I want to use this method, I'll leave this, but I'll write another one, and I'll call it void change customer ID. And then I'll say this customer ID equals 12, like this, right? And then in, let's just say this constructor, even though I assigned this, but I'll just go like, okay, now I'll just say this change customer ID, like this. So this does not return anything, but it does something, right? It changes my customer ID to 12. And with this constructor that just takes one parameter, which is this company name, right? So this one that we just used, even though we first assign this here, and we'll be actually able to change it later on, because, well, this is some method that does something because maybe our logic requires from us to actually do that. Maybe, might be, right? So when we run this code now, we'll see, okay, it's back to 12. Even though this should actually add a random number to it, then this will change it. And we can see that as well, because what we did here is we just said console write line my first customer. Now we can, before we do this, we can just say, okay, this. So I copied this line from here, and I said like, okay, just try to express this in text, and this is the current object, right? I think this is for like beginning programmers. This is something that is really hard to understand, that this represents the the object we are working on, and that might be any object, because the class just says this is the definition and the blueprint of an object, and this represents the object that might be created later on in the future. And this would actually mean that object in the future that was created, and then the program is working on it. Yeah. Okay, so when we do this, and we'll see, first of all, because first this constructor is being run, so we get this random ID assigned, then the company name that was passed assigned. We print out the object, so we have this random number here, and this Polsat TV, the default value of the revenue, right? And then this method that does not return anything is run. So we go and we see, okay, the customer ID changes, right? And finally, because that's the last part of the constructor is finished, this means that our object is being created finally and being passed to this variable, and finally is being printed out again through our main program, right? Now, if you want to see this in action a little bit more, I told you that we can use breakpoints, and this is what I want to do now. So I'll put a breakpoint in the beginning of our whole program, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this here, right? I'll hit escape, and let's just do like this. Okay, should work. Okay, I'm running the program now. Cool. Get rid of these so that I have most of the code I want to have. Okay, I'll put the program result on the right, and then we can actually go line by line. So as you can see, I put the breakpoint here on the system object.o. Remember, everything in C# is an object, right? So everything derives from the object. Everything inherits from object. Everything is an object. So yeah. Yeah. Okay. Just a quick reminder. This is really important. Yeah. Okay. So we're on this line. Nothing appeared on the screen. Yeah. And we can actually go through our code line by line. If we want to do so, we can go here, and there is this step into, which means like go to the next line, right? And it's the short key for this is F11. So we're going to keep on pressing F11 now. So we press F11, and we can see our yellow pointer went into this customer class, because now it needs to create the memory for our class. This is what I was talking about earlier, that first of all, if there is this default constructor, it just creates the memory, and that's it, because default constructor does not do anything. And besides the constructor, because we set the new keyword, this means that we just need to create the object, and this means that we need to reserve all the memory. So that's why this is declaring those variables. So we have this one, and this one. Next, it will jump into the constructor. I hope it will, but I think it will. It will jump into the constructor, that we wanted to use. So it should jump into this one, somewhere here. Let's see. Yes, hello. I told you so. So it should jump into this one because that's the one that we wanted to use. So it declared all the memory for us. And now it's doing everything that we wanted it to do when the object is being created. That's why we use the constructor, right? So it goes line by line. It received this variable, and we can see, okay, it's named Polsat TV, right? And one other thing that you might want to see when you're actually trying to figure out what your program is doing is you want to go to debug, and then there's a whole bunch of stuff, but what are we looking for is Windows, and going to the right, and then there is this watch, and then choose any watch, right? And you can put variable names or expressions into the watch. So you can say this, so that I can see what is the current value of this. Because we wrote this this piece of code that represents, so this piece of code represents our object in some text way. That's why this watch is able to actually print this for us. Else it would be actually a bit unable to do so, and it will just print out into objects dot customer. But still, even if this would just be printed out as something that is not meaningful for you, you can extend this tree, because this object has a tree, and then you'll see inside of this object, and you'll see, okay, you can use, you can see the company name, the customer ID, and the yearly revenue, which we all printed out here, right? Okay, so we'll keep this here. Right. There is no output in our program yet, because we're actually in the constructor and nothing is being output yet. Okay, so we're setting the customer ID now. So we hit F11, boom. And of course, we're setting the customer ID, but what we wanted to do is run a method that returns a value. So that's why the code jumped here, and it needs to create that. So we're creating the object of type random that will be a generator for random numbers for us. And then what we want to do is return that random number back. So here is the return, and that's the end of this method. And then you see we're back here. Nothing changed here, but in a second, when we jump to the next line, because that method just finished, so now we can jump into the next line. Currently we're on the assignment because we have this value. This value has just returned, but the assignment has not been evaluated yet. So now when we hit F11, you'll see that something changed here. This went red and this went red. Why? Because Visual Studio, whenever you actually run your code, will let you know, marking stuff red, whenever something changes, right? So the customer ID just changed. That's why this got marked red. So that you can, it might be that you have loads of stuff here, loads of variables, loads of properties, loads of stuff here, and your eye won't see the difference between the previous one and the current one. But these changed, right? So that's why these are marked red. Now, if you have hit F11 again, then you'll see, okay, this one remained the same since the last line, right? So this one is not red anymore, but this one changed because this one had a different text on the now it's Polsat TV. Earlier it was some company, right? And you can see this one as well changed because this one actually changed, right? So yeah, that's why it is. Now, when we hit F11 here, you can see that the console write, where it is, so we were on this line, we say write this, right? And then this means that, okay, we need the text representation of this object, right? That's why it jumped into this function, which I told you it is actually something that represents this object as text. And then it just uses this return. Yeah, and now you know why here we had to put string and why we had to put return here. And then returns a string, which is just an expression. We could put any text here. We could put everything you wanted here, right? And it works, right? So, yeah. When we hit F11 again, it goes to the ending bracket, which means that our function already finished, function method. And now this value is passed to this writeLine method to be actually printed on the console screen, which you can see here, right? And we move further. Now the next thing we want to do is use another method that does not return any value. So we hit F11 and we can see, oh yeah, that's what is happening. So that's the method, right? We change the customer ID to 12. If we do that, we can see, okay, yeah, it did change here in the watch, right, down below, and the method changed. And we can see also that this is the end of our constructor. So the next part should be the rest of our code in the main method of our program. I like to call it the main function of our program, but yeah, it's the main method of our program. Yeah, so we're back into our main method of our program. Now we have successfully created our customer object, right? Our object of type customer, and we're finally assigning it to our variable. So yeah, it's being assigned, and finally we're printing it out. So again, we're printing out this object now. So this object is passed and to this writeLine, and writeLine is like, okay, I need to represent this object as text. So I need to use a function for that, a method, and this method is called toString. So I'll look if the object has such a method, and it has, so it runs this again and returns it, right? So when we return it, it gets printed here, right? This is what we have here, because we had this, and it kind of stays for us. It's grayed out because this variable does not exist anymore. If we click this, then you'll see, okay, now it's not valid anymore. There's nothing in this scope. Now we're going to talk about scope, but I'm just saying that at some point when you use these watches, some variables will just cease to exist, right? Okay, this got printed out. Finally, we have this method that waits for user input. So whenever we run this, our console gets activated because it's just waiting for our input. So let's just press any key, and you can see now our program is finishing because there's nothing else to run. But let's just hit F11. Let's see what else it might do. Oh, that's not what I wanted. I'm sorry. F11, and you see it finished. Okay, so now we more or less have a faint idea of how methods work. We'll jump into methods in the next video. Let's just quickly wrap up this video. So thanks for watching and have a good day. Cheers.